Here we are again. Dun, dun, dun. The Northern Digital Storytelling Festival 2023, and we're now on session 18. And we've been going great guns, trucking through. We're now on the third last session of the festival. But we are joined with some fantastic people tonight. We're joined by Ben Porter and Wayne Sables, and they're going to talk to us around digital storytelling with no budget, which is a really good topic for us all to know. For most of my life, I had no budget, so I'm really looking forward to hearing the tips and tricks that these guys have got. And also, it's just really useful to share this sort of thing because a lot of these digital tools are expensive. Buying a Quest 3 or Quest 2 is, sorry, Quest 3 is not out yet. Buying a Quest 2 is like £399, I think, and all of the film kit that you have to buy is really expensive. Even the lights are like mega expensive. And just talking to the virtual production crowd a couple of days ago, when you start getting into these sorts of spaces, then you need to pretty much remortgage your house. So it's really good to have a session around digital storytelling with no budget to see what the opportunities might be in terms of being able to create excellent stories without breaking the bank. So that's the plan for today. We've got a slightly different format to usual, just so you know, just to shake things up slightly, just in case you were getting a bit complacent. So we're going to have a little bit of an intro and story from Wayne first, and then from Ben for 10 minutes each. And then after that, we're going to have more sort of hints and tips. So more of a slightly more practical kind of session for 15 minutes around tips on zero budget filmmaking from Wayne. And then we're going to have tips on telling your own story and utilising local networks from Ben. And then right at the end, there'll be a wee bit of space, hopefully, for you guys to ask your own questions if you've got any queries and questions, and we can have a wee chat with the panelists at the end of the session, and hopefully that will work okay for everybody. So just a quickie, thank you very much to Sign, Screen Industries Growth Network, for sponsoring the festival, without whom we couldn't run it. So a big shout out to you guys. Again, just to say a big thank you for you. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh yeah, my name's Heather Niven, and Maggie is my co-host, partner in crime. We've been planning this festival since before Christmas, and so we've been trying to design the festival just to bring disparate people together from theatre, from AI, from mixed reality, XR, all sorts, mobile, all sorts of digital storytelling sort of realms, and trying to bring disparate folk together to have unusual conversations. So that's kind of been the bit of a plan for the festival generally. And we hope, and I think we have actually achieved that. We've had some really interesting conversations from people, from academics, from businesses, and it's been an interesting and insightful time, so I hope you agree. Okay, enough of me. I'm now going to introduce you to Wayne, and then Wayne's going to give you a bit of an intro and story. I maybe shouldn't go into it too much. Oh, I will, because then it's, what is it the marketeers say, that if you listen to something 3 times it goes into the old grey matter. So I'll just do it very, very quickly, and then I'll pass the reins over to Wayne. Okay, so Wayne Sables has over 19 years experience working with a wide range of businesses, councils, community groups and educational centres. He loves producing, designing, developing and delivering high quality, large scale multi-art projects and creating films that tell his partners and clients' stories. Working within both the creative and commercial industries has given him a unique insight into how the two can work together to create projects that have a mass engagement and increase a company's reach. Today, he's going to discuss the challenges and strategies of making a film with limited resources, how to use your creativity, network and existing resources to create a compelling film, from writing a script to finding locations, working with actors and editing. You'll discover cost-effective techniques that can help you bring your vision to life. Whether you're a filmmaker, a writer or a film enthusiast, this talk will provide you with valuable insights and tips for making a film on a tight budget. And by the end of the session, you'll have a better understanding of how to make a film without breaking the bank. Over to you, Wayne.
Fabulous. Yeah, so as Heather said, myself and Ben had a quick chat before, and we're going to break this up a little bit so you don't have to hear me waffle on for too long, because I have a fantastic habit of getting far too involved, and then Heather starts giving me the proverbial hook to pull me off. So she's got permission to jump in if she needs to today. So I've been doing this for ages. Since 2001, I've worked in the arts, and I think in many ways I've a really traditional story. I'm going to start my stop clock. There we go. I have a really traditional story, but also I think it's quite unique. So I used to kind of have this media friendly version of my story, but then actually as I get older and a little bit grayer, I figured, well, I should probably not have a media version and just tell the truth, really. So that's what you're going to get. You're going to get the unabridged truth, really. So I'm, you might be able to tell from my accent, but I'm a northerner. So I was brought up in Doncaster, and a very traditional upbringing. So I was the son of a miner. So and I was born in 1980. So I had all of that stuff that happened in the 80s. And I don't know if any of you remember the 80s. Being from Doncaster and working in the arts was it's not a traditional pathway, really. So when I was at school, again, very traditional, very average student, you know, didn't excel at anything really, but I was good at running and I was good at jumping around. And I remember having, and I was good at drama. I really liked drama. It was the only class that I really felt like I could express myself in a way that was acceptable at that time. And I remember going, having a careers advisor saying, okay, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I kind of go, okay, I want to go be a stuntman. Actually, it's what I want to do, because, you know, lads from Doncaster did that. That was quite viable. And she said, "Oh, what does your dad do?" And I think this is the turning point in my life. She said, "What did your dad do?" And I said, "Oh, my dad's a car mechanic." And she said, "Okay, well, go do that. Go be a car mechanic, because that's safe. That's a job for life. And you know, if you go into the arts, you're going to be unemployed a lot." And I said, "Okay, fine." So I went back to my dad. I said, "Dad, I had my careers advice. They told me not to be a stuntman. They told me to go be a car mechanic with you." And he said, "Absolutely not. No way. You're not working for me. Go be a stuntman." He says, "Because you can always come back and be a car mechanic if that doesn't work." And I said, "Okay, well, I'll go do that." So I went to college, and I thought, well, I did some research, you know, and went to one of those things called the library and did some research. And I remember kind of figuring out that you had to have two disciplines. So you had to have I originally trained in martial arts. So I'd done martial arts for being 11 years old. I was good at getting kicked. So I thought, well, that's quite good. So I thought, well, I'll go do performing arts. So I did performing arts, and I thought, well, I'm going to go do dance, because that's the same thing in my head, you know, my 16-year-old head. And there was this guy, and it sounds a bit corny to say that, but there's this guy called Jean-Claude Van Damme. I don't know if any of you guys know who he is, but he was called the Muscles from Brussels way back when. And he was a big action star at the time, and he had this thing that his USP was he trained in ballet, and he worked in a florist, and I thought, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. So I did this whole BTEC in dance performing arts, and then I went to a conservatoire and did a degree in contemporary dance, because I thought, well, you know, martial arts, dance, Jean-Claude Van Damme can do it. I can be somebody's body double. I can get kicked and get somebody pay me for it, right? That feels like a good career. And then, so I graduated in 2001 as a dancer, and then like, I wish this was the bit of my story where I said, like, I had this really grand master plan, and I had this whole strategic overview, and it all came true. And here's like the little bit. Remember Al Pacino's butt in said film? That's mine. That is absolutely not my story. So I wish I could say that, but I can't. So I ended up kind of having a 10-year career as a professional dancer, still with the aim of being a stuntman. And I never planned anything. So I just thought, well, you know, when you leave uni, you need money, because we have student debt and things. So I just took a job, and I jumped. Somebody paid me to jump around on stage, so I did that for a bit. But what I did, I had, like, when I reflect back, I had this weird thing where I worked for companies that were really, really physical. So it was like throwing yourself around. So it was really combining martial arts and dance. I guess I kind of fulfilled my ambition of being a stuntman, just not being Al Pacino's backside as a stuntman. And then what happened is in 2009, I retired as a dancer, and you know, at the risk of sounding a bit lofty, like, I was really lucky. I toured all over the world, and I lived in the States, and I had this really tremendous dance career, and I worked with some really great companies. And I was on stage at end of the tour, 2009. I was on a show, and I don't know if any of you guys are performers, but you know, when you're on stage and you lose all sense of time, right? So you're on and you're doing your thing and you're moving and you're dancing, and you get to the end bows, and you go, oh God, how did we get here? Like, that's flown by. I remember the absolute opposite. I literally remember being stood on stage and looking at the guy in the blue shirt and looking at the lady in the cardigan and whatnot, and being uber present in the moment, like the opposite of what you're meant to do. And I came off stage and I said to the director, because it was the end of the tour, I said, oh, do you know, like, I'm done. I'm not coming back. Like, I can't do this anymore. And there was no big epiphany moment. I just remember kind of the moment where I go, I don't love this anymore. But I'd always been interested in digital. Like, I was always making films. I was always kind of borrowing my parents' camcorder as a kid. No, because I wanted to be a stuntman. I was always filming myself. And I just thought, well, I've always liked films and cameras, and I love watching films. Maybe I'll go do that. So I taught myself how to make films, and I thought, well, I know how to jump around. Maybe I can jump around on camera, film that, and that might open some doors somewhere. So I started making my own dance films, and as these things do, you put them out there in the world, and it goes to a festival and so on, and somebody else goes, oh, can you come and do a dance film for me, and whatnot. And then I started getting well known as a dance filmmaker. And then what happened is that spanned into other areas of work. So then I started making, documentaries. I started working for other companies and working for councils, and I'm one of those kind of, like, I'm not academic in any way, shape, or form. So I learn by doing. I'm a kinesthetic learner. So the more films I made, the more kind of the better I got at storytelling, and the better I got at kind of my production values. But of course, I didn't go to film school. I didn't have a film network. I'm a perpetual chancer in that sense. I'm completely making this up. So I've been doing this for over 20 years and I'm still making it up, but I'm making it up with 20 years experience. I guess that's kind of like the difference to that. So I didn't have this network. So I wasn't able to draw down funding. So I wasn't able to go, well, the BFI didn't really exist then in this form, but I wasn't able to go to the BFI and go, got this really interesting story, son of a miner, wanted to be a stuntman, was a dancer, now a filmmaker, give me some money. Maybe I should try that at the next pitching, but at that point, like, there wasn't an avenue for me to do it. So I had to make films for the love of making films on no budget, on zero budget. And I'll come into that later in my presentation about how to do that and not compromise your production values. But like, super quick, so I've got 2 minutes on my timer left. But basically, from making films, that led me to, like, open up a whole new avenue, because I suddenly realized I'm not the only DIY filmmaker. I'm not the only indie filmmaker. Because I come from a dance background, that's a real asset. Because I come from the north, where this is not a traditional pathway, that was a massive asset for me. And when I changed my thinking on that, that's when all of these possibilities started to open up. So, once you make a film and you go to a festival and people know it, funding kind of comes later down the line, really. And then from there, I started projection mapping, because I was at Leeds Light Night and I saw a projection mapper and I thought, that doesn't look that different from dance. That doesn't look that different from film. It's a lens. So I popped over to the guy and I bugged him, forced him to let me buy him a coffee. He said, yes, like, go away, just buy me a coffee tomorrow. Here's my number, kind of thing. I met him for coffee. He's now my business partner in our projection mapping company. And then recently I did it again. I got super curious and I saw some light installations. I thought, oh, I'd quite like to do that. So we just got some money to do a light installation. So for me, I've always followed kind of things that I've been really interested in. And I just did a podcast recently, and it was quite funny because they just released it, and I didn't realize that they've called it Shiny New Things, because I think I'm like a bit like a magpie sometimes, and I see shiny new things and I go, oh, that's really interesting. But with my core base of kind of movement and film, really. And then, since then, I've had films in festivals that have done really well. I've got my first feature documentary that's in the festival circuit at the moment, that's doing the rounds. And I think, yeah, so just kind of to sum all of that up, really, I think for me, I never had a grand plan. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I've always kind of done things that I'm really excited about and really passionate about. I've spent my entire adult career, where possible, not being a car mechanic. not getting a proper job, and I've been really successful at not having a proper job in that sense. I mean, we could debate that all day. Of course, it's a proper job, like all jokes aside. But I'm a really, really big believer in following your passion and following things that really excite you. And when you work on things that really excite you, you get really good at them, and then budgets follow, really. So yeah, that's my story, and then I will pick up my presentation in 10 minutes from that point. Did I do it, Heather? Did I do it under my 10-minute time slot?
That was pretty good, actually. It's pretty good, Wayne. Well done. Well done. You can come back. And I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up either, mate. So I'm glad I'm in good company. Okay, I'm going to introduce you now, Ben, if that's okay. Yours is a little bit smaller than Wayne's, I'm afraid. Sorry, I just nicked what you sent me, so I can talk slower. Okay, it means that you have longer now to explain yourself. So it's okay. Okay, so Ben Porter spent his early 20s creating branded content for commercial clients, including Adidas, Burberry, and Sony, alongside building a thriving arts collective of 4,500 plus creatives in York. He built the collective without any public funding, using just a laptop and camera. With over a decade of experience working in digital media with very little budget, Ben brings his expertise and storytelling to this workshop on digital storytelling with a limited budget. And that's all I got. Over to you, Ben.
Cool, thank you, Heather. I'll just share my screen. Just give it a second to load. You should see a child on a skateboard. Can you see that? Perfect. Okay, cool. So it was actually really interesting hearing Wayne's story, because there's quite a lot of overlap. I thought my story was quite unusual, but perhaps it's not that unusual. So yeah, this is where my storytelling journey began. Basically being a child on a skateboard, also trying to throw myself off things. I was the kid who basically, when my friend said, let's go down to the skate park, I was like, hang on, let me grab a camera, and we're going to make a video out of this. And I started telling the other kids where to stand to get the best shot, not really knowing why I was telling them, why I thought I knew better than they did. But slowly, I would collect the films together, and I would start editing them. And this was my first attempt of trying to get into the world of digital storytelling. And so, of course, the videos that I made in those first few years were pretty awful. Like, if you imagine what kind of a 12, 13, 14-year-old would do with Windows Movie Maker and a really cheap camera, then you would be spot on. Crazy titles flying in here, there, and everywhere, really silly sound effects, absolutely no regard for sound levels or exposure levels. But, that didn't really matter. I was learning how to find my voice through making decisions about what to keep and what to cut. And so I'd never really considered that being a storyteller could be a career. I mean, if I'd have sat down and thought about it, then perhaps I could have worked out that, somebody had to have made the films that I was watching on the TV. But I didn't know anybody who did that for a living. That wasn't really my experience. All of my friends' parents seemed to have real jobs, and that meant wearing a uniform and working in an office. So I kind of just assumed that was what I would probably do too. Literally the one creative job that I knew that one of my parents' friends had was being an architect, and I knew that meant building houses. So I started to think, oh, maybe one day I'll become an architect, and then I could build myself a house with a cinema and a recording studio in it, so I could fulfill my creative things. Still never thinking that actually, somebody would do that and get paid for it. And so, yeah, I always played in bands, and I loved how that would bring people together to tell stories with rhythm and melody. So fast forward several years, and I found myself in York. So this was a new city for me, and I didn't know anybody there at all. And I remember really trying to find out where to go to try and meet like-minded creative people, and just really struggling for several years. Google wasn't really much help back then. It didn't really have the location thing sorted out. And so I just kept constantly having this feeling that I was only finding out about the cool stuff happening after it had already happened. And so I wanted to do something to change that. I wanted to find a way to break up the cliques that naturally tend to form in small communities and try and open it right out and make it more inclusive. So I decided that I was going to tell a story. In 2015, I decided to launch a project called Plastic Fortune, which was a creative collective for 16 to 30-year-olds. And in order to build this, I talked about how York's reliance on history and heritage was stifling creativity and driving young people away from the city. I called for young creative people to come together and join this collective rather than simply moving away to the bigger cities, and I started making little documentaries about members of the collective. This project grew and grew over the next 18 months until I started to get told off by the adult artists who told me that they really liked what I was doing and they were offended that they couldn't be involved because I'd put an age bracket on them and they were too old. So they told me, creativity is for everybody, not just for the youth, and asked me to remove the age bracket. So of course I did that, and I renamed the project to York Creatives in late 2016. Since then, we've now grown to over 4,500 members, as Heather mentioned, and we've got like an active core of around 500 people regularly coming along to our events and workshops. We run talks, we run socials, we run workshops, we do podcasts, books, zines, and occasionally we do big public events like hiring out our local market and throwing a big party where 2,500 people came. And we've done all this without ever taking anybody's money. We've never written a single funding bid. We've never received donations or sponsorship, and none of the admin team has ever been paid a penny. We do it all around our other jobs just because we love doing it. And all it really took to build this was a laptop, a camera, and a Facebook group, and a story. So in the second half of this workshop, I'll share some practical tips that will help you when you're telling your story, and hopefully will help you tell it in a way that resonates with your audience. Because there isn't really a huge secret to storytelling, but there is a process, which makes everything so much easier, and it will supercharge the chance that other people will take notice of you and your story. But before we get to that, I just wanted to share a few kind of notable moments, things that I've either managed to get for free or for next to nothing, simply by telling stories. So remember when I said I got told off by a bunch of older artists for not allowing them into my collective? Well, I think one of the reasons that they were slightly annoyed was the fact that I'd managed to convince a charity to give me the keys to 2,500 square foot of office space in the middle of our city centre. I had the entire third floor of this big ugly concrete building you can see on the left, where we spray painted the walls, we built a workshop, we built a cinema, a stage for performers, and we filled the place full of sofas. So it was half art studio, half squat, but we ran kind of tons of events that got people really excited about what we were doing. And I think secretly, they wished they'd got that space, but I'd got in there first. And, the only reason I got in there first was because I've been telling this story about how I really needed space and how York was really difficult. And, there's all these young creative people, where are we going to go? And so somebody heard that story and got in touch and said, hey, check this charity out. When I was 22, I got invited to sit on a board of advisors to my local council, advising them on cultural and creative issues. And I remember just sitting in these meetings, like the first few, thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I don't even understand most of the words they're using, let alone be able to contribute anything useful. But over time, eventually I started to get to know some of the people in there and the projects they were working on, and began to share my perspective on some of the decisions that they were making. And it was realizing that actually I was only invited to sit on that board because I had a unique perspective, because I had a different story that nobody else there was sharing, that made me useful. And so I was useful to them because I was telling my version of my story and not trying to tell someone else's story. A year later, a filmmaker reached out to help, to ask me if I would help him start a film production company. And so we collaborated on a few projects, which then led to a few more, which then led to working with clients like Adidas, Absolute Vodka, and Sony. We doubled the company in size for several years in a row. And then when I left in 2019, I sold my half of that company, which gave me a couple of years worth of wages to then figure out what I wanted to do next. And again, he only reached out to me in the first place because I was telling stories in public using the digital tools that I had. Okay, so last one. This one always puts a smile on my face. So ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to go up in a hot air balloon. So you could imagine my delight one day when I got a Facebook message from someone saying he just bought a hot air balloon and wondered if I wanted to come and make a video about it. He was like, I can't really pay you, but I can take you up in the balloon. I was like, yes, please. That same guy ended up starting the York Balloon Fiesta, where, as you can see here, dozens of balloons flew over the city, and I got to go along for a ride several years in a row. So all this to say that cool stuff will happen when you tell your story. So I'm now going to hand back over to Wayne, who's going to share some practical tips on zero budget filmmaking. And then when it comes back to me, I'll talk about the process I use when telling my own stories, which you're free to take and steal for yourself.
So I'm just going to share my screen now, and that should pop up, which is always useful. Let me set my timer because I've gone over once before and I'm not doing it again. Okay, so filmmaking on low to no budget. So I think the first thing to highlight is filmmaking by design is expensive, because it traditionally involves lots and lots of people, involves lots of infrastructure, it involves lots of paperwork, and lots and lots of time. But actually, if you break it down into what the fundamental aspects of it are, which we'll do in the next 14.5 minutes, filmmaking is telling stories. So that's what we are. We're storytellers. And actually, I would go even one step further, and say life is about telling stories. You know, it's what we do. It's what cements us together as communities. It's what cements us together as countries and nations and all of that jazz. So, okay. So this is super obvious, right? But I get asked this a lot. In order to make films, there is one thing you have to do, and that is make films. And it is super, super simple. And a film can be anything from a 1-second shot to an epic kind of 20-hour kind of durational thing. So in Sweden at the moment, they're doing what's called long videos, which are one-shot videos in the cab of a train, right, as it goes from one side to the other, and they've had millions and millions of views on YouTube. So a film is about telling a story, and we can be super clever and we can do 1,001 shots, or we can be super simple and do it in one shot. If it's compelling and interesting, people will watch it. So the next thing is no budget doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So everything has a cost, and it might not necessarily be a monetary cost. So it might be a cost on time. So your time has a value. So your friends and family's time, because when you start making films, they are going to be as involved as you are, because you are going to drag them in, because you're going to need crew and you're going to need actors and you're going to need all those other things. Unless you're going to start like me and jump around in front of a camera, at which point, you can't jump around and move the camera at the same time. Well, maybe you can now. Maybe there's some new kit, some steady rig that you can, but back then you couldn't. So, when I get, the reason I put this up is because I don't want you to equate money with value. So value, money, it's an enabler, but it should never stop you telling your story. Okay, so number one, the first thing when you're making a film, budget or no budget actually, is what kind of film do you want to make? So you need to decide what you want to make. Is it going to be a documentary? Is it going to be a narrative? Is it going to be experimental? Is it going to be art? Is it going to be any of the myriad of other types of films you can make? So I put these in because these are the type of films I make. So, I started making art films, then moved into experimental, moved into narrative, and moved into documentary. So that was just, for me, it's really important to define the genre and style in which you're going to work in, because that then has a snowball effect to the next bit. And at this point, remember, no money has changed hands yet. That comes later when you get really, really good. And later also, sorry to burst your bubble, spoiler, later never ever comes. It's you're always battling for money, but the doors get a little bit wider and the budgets get a little bit bigger. But you're always asking. Okay, so the next bit you have to do, and this is the bit that everybody rolled their eyes, so please feel free to do the same and don't feel guilty about it, is planning, pre-production. This is where your film is made. And if you're like me and are dyslexic, this is not your favorite part of the filmmaking process, because it's a complete challenge. And so we usually call this the pre-production phase, and it can be anything from writing scripts, writing storyboards, treatment, post-it notes, which is or beer mats, which is my go-to. I can't, like, if I haven't worked it out, but if I've made 100 films, 85 of them were conceived on a beer mat or a post-it note. So you don't have to have fancy software to do this. All you need is the ability to get your idea from your head onto some sort of paper. I am the world's best stickman drawer. If you ask me to do any more than that, you're barking up the wrong tree. I can't do any more than that. But I can, but you don't have to, because this is for you. This bit, before you give anyone, this is for you. So script, storyboard, treatment, whatever it is that works for you, find a way to get your idea down. The next thing you need to decide is, what are you going to shoot on? So everybody, near enough, You know, we could have an argument around digital poverty, but everybody has access to a phone in some form. It doesn't have to be the latest phone. If your phone has a camera, you have a production studio in your pocket. And there's a whole wave now of smartphone filmmaking festivals. So there was a film called Tangerine that won Sundance Film Festival. It was shot on 2 iPhone 5Ss. So there's a whole market for it. So technology is about, for me, it's about enabling you, not disabling you, in a sense of making your film. So yes, of course, we all want to shoot off the Red. So we all want to shoot off the Arri Alexa. Of course we do. But that shouldn't stop you from making films. Okay, so the next bit is you're going to need a cast and a crew. So it's you versus the world, this. So again, you've decided your genre, you've decided what you're shooting on. So this bit, then kind of, that stuff dictates this bit. So if you're making a documentary, so you're going to need a subject. So this would be your cast. So, you know, it could be anything from, you know, a documentary about Tourette's to a documentary about climate action. So once you've decided your subject, then you can figure out, well, is this something I can do on my own? You know, I have to make documentaries on my own in terms of the filming process, because you want to be really nimble. You want to be really like unimposing. You don't want to have 20 people around you. If you're going to make a dance film, you might need some dancers. So this is where you call in those favors with your family and your friends. And don't ever feel embarrassed about asking for support and asking for help. You know, we are not islands. Like, nobody got here on their own. You know, the biggest Spielberg didn't just rock up and was Spielberg. Right? Everybody gets help, and people are generally really good, and people want to help. And also, let's be honest, it's really cool to be in a film. So if you say, you know, to Auntie Nora, do you want to be in my film? She's probably going to say yes, because that's a really cool thing to do. Okay, so the next thing, locations. You need somewhere to film it, but you can't just rock up and film anywhere. I mean, if it's a public space, you can, because there's a Public Spaces Act. But if it's private land, you can't. So what you need to do is you need to get really bold about asking for people to sign things. So you know, get a location release form. This just and it sounds overkill, and it sounds a bit formal, and it sounds a bit official, but I promise you, it will save you any trouble down the line. So I've been in situations where we've agreed locations, and excuse me, something's happened, and that location is no longer available. So we have no comeback to go, oh, we have an agreement, we have a release form, and there are loads of free forms. So there's a place called Storyblocks. And that's a free resource. I have, because I do lots of sharing stuff. I've got a Google folder which I'll send to Heather, which anybody can access all these documents, because I've pre-compiled into one form, so you don't have to search Google for 5 hours of your life. But I know it sounds super boring, and I am going to move on from this bit because it's the worst bit for me. But it can make or break your shoot if you don't get things signed. Okay. So you've got things signed, you've got your pre-production, you've got your crew on board, you've got your genre, you've got your location agreements all set up in place. You've got your camera, you've decided, so you're ready to shoot. There's a couple more steps that we need to think about. Light. So any filmmakers out there will know that the easiest and most kind of readily available bit of your film crew, your film kit, is the camera. The bit that really makes your film is light. It's super important, especially if you're shooting from night to day, especially if you're shooting it indoors and outdoors. But as Heather said earlier, light is very, very expensive, like sometimes more expensive than the camera in that sense. And then all of a sudden, you've got this fantastic idea. You've got everybody's on board. You know, Auntie Nora's ready. She's willing. Makeup artist spin round. She's all made up. We're all set. And all of you suddenly go, oh, but we can't see her. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. And I do this a lot, really. Natural lighting. So there's this thing in the sky. It is the best light in the world, and it's free. So use natural lighting, use daylight, use outside. It's the best source of light, and nobody's going to bill you for it. If you're shooting indoors, think about how creative can you get with it. Use existing lighting. So I always, when I'm doing interviews indoors, I kind of have a lamp next to the person I'm interviewing. A, because it looks really cool, but B, it's giving me light, it's doing something. If you do have a budget, or you have a friend that works for a company like Provision, for example, other companies are available, you might be able to kind of get some goodwill. There's nothing to stop you messaging or phoning hire companies up and saying, I'm making a film, I don't have a budget, do you have anything that you could lend us, and we'll put you in the credits as a sponsor? I've done that before. I know people that do it. Usually a lot of students do it, but it's not exclusively a student thing. And that can then, give you more equipment. The other thing to think about is pick a style and stick to it. So pick a style of lighting and stick to it. Don't get super experimental and try 5 different lighting styles, because that won't create a look across all of your films, and it won't create a visual language for you working with it. Okay, moving on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? We've all heard that, right? Can you hear me now? Sound. Sound is the next thing that will make or break your film. So deep within us as human beings, we are more attuned to sound and visuals. And there's a whole social science field around why that is. I'm not a scientist, but I do know that when I watch things and the sound is off, it doesn't sit right with me, and it makes me feel a certain way. When the visuals are off, I'm much more forgiving. And a really, really great example of that is Blair Witch Project. If any of you have seen that film, or Cloverfield, like, from a technical point of view, the filming is horrendous. It's horrendous. It's all over. It makes you feel dizzy. One could argue that's the style and visual look that they're going for, and it definitely does that. But they nailed the sound. It's the sound that will elevate your film to the next level. Think about if you're sat in a dark room, or when you hear a sound at night, it has a very visceral, emotional reaction. And it's the same with film, and we can use that to our advantage. So super quick, rule of sound, proximity is key. So the closer the microphone is to your subject, the better the quality the sound is generally, if you get your levels right, so it doesn't kind of sound really muffly. The further away it is, the less kind of distinctive it is, because don't forget, if you're using your camera phone and you're using sound off your camera phone, it's picking everything up in between and your subject. And if you're like me and not as fit as you used to be, it will pick you up breathing as you're trying to run up that big giant hill on that chase scene that you've decided you desperately need in this film. And you picked a really good runner as your actor, and you're not. Just that's a free tip there. Okay, there's only 2 or 3 more slides. So the next bit, you're prepped, you're prepared, you've done it, you've got everything in place. Go shoot your film. Go make loads of mistakes. Go reshoot it. But my advice is, when you're filming, be well prepared, be efficient, and be productive. And I haven't put this on here, but be decisive. Make decisions and stick to them. Be confident in your decisions. There's nothing worse than being the director on set and not quite knowing what you're doing, especially if you've got people there, if you've got a crew, whether they're friends or not. Doesn't instill confidence if you're not decisive in what you're doing. And the old saying, time is money. So being clunky on set is a surefire way to lose goodwill. So remember, this is no budget. So you're working on favors. What you don't want to do is exhaust those favors on your first film. I was on a film shoot for a streaming service a while ago, and they are very, very good at keeping to time, because for every minute they go over, it's costing actual money. So use that with yourself. If you've booked 3 hours to film it in 3 hours. Don't film it in 6. Because that's a really great way to have people not come back. Right, moving on. Last thing, post-production. So you need to edit all of this stuff down. So you've got all of your raw footage, you need to edit it. So there are loads of free apps you can do this on. You can do this whole process on your phone. And I've done it. I'm out of time, so I'm going to be really quick. You can do this whole process on your phone. My super quick advice, though, is storing footage. If you have iCloud or a cloud service, put a version of it on that cloud, because there's nothing worse than losing your footage. I've done it. I've had hard drives fail and not had backups. It's a really difficult conversation when you've got to go back to a client or go back to the talent and say, that day we did, you were amazing. Footage looks fantastic. Only downside is I've lost it. Can we reshoot it? It's not the best. It's not the best look. And I say that from experience. So I'd rather you guys not have that experience. Okay. So let me just stop sharing this. There we go. So super whistle stop tour. I'm aware that my voice went up an octave and went like 1.5 speed the last minute and a half of that. But I mean, yeah, the key to it all is go out and film, make mistakes, make sure you're as prepared as you can be, because the way you get better at being a great storyteller and a great filmmaker is to go and do it and make mistakes and then learn from it, because they're not mistakes if you learn from them.
Brilliant, Wayne. Thank you very much for that. That was excellent. Yeah, and what programs would you suggest for free? Is it, do you use DaVinci Resolve?
Yeah, so I use DaVinci Resolve, and that has a really powerful free version. And I know professional filmmakers that have still not reached a level where they need to upgrade to the paid version. You do need a decent computer for that, but there is a free version on the iPad Pro as well. I also iMovie if you use iOS. Splice is a great one if you use Windows, and they're all free. I can, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Ben, are you ready?
I'm ready, yeah.
All right,
cool, thank you.
Go. Good stuff. On you go, mate.
Great, just load my screen up 1 second. Is that working? Yeah, perfect. Cool. Okay, so telling your own story when you haven't got a budget. So why might you want to tell your own story? Well, there's a few reasons. You might be trying to launch a new project. You might be trying to acquire some customers for a business that you run. You might be trying to sell a new product or service to an existing business. Or maybe you're just trying to build an audience as an entertainer or thought leader or an influencer or something like that. Or even if none of that applies, you still probably need to build your own personal network. The creative industry is really built on networking, and networking is basically telling your story in a way that resonates with someone enough to say, oh yeah, they're going to be a useful person. I'll get their phone number or their email address or whatever. And so you can understand, you can do all of these things very well with very little budget once you understand how stories work. So I'm going to give a very quick 1-minute overview of story structure. Hopefully you all know this already, but if not, basically all stories follow the same structure. So we're introduced to a character and their world. So this is who is the story about. Something then happens to shake up that world. So this is, why is this a story at all? They then go on a journey to discover some new knowledge. So this is the what and the how, this is the action of the story. They then have to put that knowledge to the test. So sometimes this is more action, but usually it's the deeper meaning behind the action. So it's the sacrifice that they have to make, or it's the emotional growth that occurs as a result of the action. And that test then leads to a success or a failure. And this is the plot of pretty much every story ever. And you'll notice that it forms a mirror. So home, away from home, back to home. So if you don't remember anything else about story structure, remember home, away from home, back to home. And this is because all stories are about transformation. And the reason that we're drawn to them is because this is how we learn. This is how life works. So we think everything is fine until one day it's not, and we have to go and do something to make it right again. If you're not yet aware of David Goggins, this person in the picture, then Google him after this and you'll hear one hell of a story. But he's, of course, a very extreme example, but this principle still applies, whether it's replacing a broken laptop, whether it's buying a new type of washing powder because the old one's making you itchy, or you're perhaps looking for something new to watch on TV or YouTube. You're all searching for something that will make you whole again and following that narrative structure. So an obvious example, each one of you is sat here in this session because you want to finish this session knowing a bit more about digital storytelling. If you weren't on that journey, then you wouldn't be here. So how do we as digital storytellers use this to our advantage? Well, You must make sure that every story you tell moves the audience closer to where they want to be. So I'll say that again. Every story you tell must move the audience closer to where they want to be. So if you went to a cooking channel and they were showing a program all about politics, you'd be really confused if there was no reference to cooking in it at all. And you'd be thinking, am I on the right channel? And this is super obvious to us as members of the audience, but then you'd be surprised how many times people get this wrong when trying to tell their story. They don't think about the audience at all. They just think, well, it's my story, so I'll tell it how I want. And this is entirely the wrong approach. So if you remember just one thing from my talk today, it should be this. You create stories that resonate by reverse engineering them. So again, you create stories that resonate by reverse engineering them. And this is how you do it. So first, you must know exactly who you are talking to. And if you think this is obvious and you can skip over it, I assure you, you will waste more time by ignoring this step than it will take to just go through it. So, please, unless you know who you're talking to, you will end up blending in with every other lazy storyteller that is trying to grab your attention right now. We all come across thousands of stories every single day, and our brain just has to shut them out, or we would simply be overwhelmed. So, you need to know that your audience is already trained to ignore you. The only way to get them to let their guard down is to really understand what it is that they want and then give them what they want. So look at this example here, if you can read it. I don't know if it's too small. It says 10 mistakes first-time buyers make when buying a house. So if you're a first-time buyer, you literally have to read this article because it feels like it was written just for you. They already know that you're worried about buying a house because it's the biggest purchase that you've ever made, and the risk of not reading this article is too high. So they've literally got you cornered. This is the way you need to think too when trying to tell your stories. So you need to know your audience. What do they want? What type of people are they? What are they interested in? What gets them excited? What gets them anxious? So the person that knows the audience the most wins, because then they're able to tell stories in ways that connect. And connection doesn't require budget, but it does require thought. Okay, so here's a tip, and you can screenshot this. So before you write anything down, you should first write, who is my audience? How do I want them to feel? And what do I hope that they take away from this? Because really, storytelling is an exercise in empathy. Then when you're writing, every few paragraphs, look back at what you wrote at the start, what you wanted them to feel, what you wanted them to take away, and make sure that what you're writing is still serving that purpose. Otherwise, you're just giving them a ton of unnecessary fluff and just weakening the story that you're trying to tell. And this doesn't need to be complicated. So for this talk, who is my audience? Digital storytellers. How do I want them to feel? Inspired, educated, empowered. What do I hope that you take away from this? Well, that you don't need a lot of money and you don't need a degree to do this. You just need to understand the process and then practice applying it. Okay, so let's talk about practice, because really you're only as good as the stories you actually put out. Those 400 drafts that you've got saved in your notes, they don't really mean anything to the audience because they don't know they exist. Your reputation is built on the work that you share, not the work that you start and don't finish. So you must build a system that allows you to get work out of the door. And the best way to do that is to start a simple, repeatable project. So a simple, repeatable project should be something that you can create either on your own or with a very small number of willing participants, and they have to be willing. It needs to be something simple enough that you can finish one regularly. So whether that's one a day, one a week, or at most one a month. If it's going to take you longer than a month, it's probably too complicated. And the beauty of a simple, repeatable project is that you set all the parameters for the project at the start, and then you spend all your time making rather than continually changing the parameters. So, we're storytellers at the end of the day. We don't want to be doing admin. We want to be telling stories. We want to be getting reps in. That's what we need to do. So in order to, give an example of this, here's a couple. So when I was in a band, we decided that we were going to go into the studio for one day every month and record 2 songs. That would then give us a new song to promote every 2 weeks. And at the end of the year, we would have 24 songs. We then picked the best 15 and put them out as an album. Simple. When I started building the Plastic Fortune Network, I just sent out a bunch of emails telling people I was a documentary filmmaker, which was of course a lie. I'd never made any documentaries in my life before, but a quick look up on YouTube on how to do it, and yeah, it wasn't that difficult. It wasn't that different to the skate videos I've been making. And I simply, in this email, I just said I wanted to interview them for a series I was making about interesting people in York. 90% of them said yes, and then I made one every 3 weeks until I got to 20 videos, and then I finished the series. Later, when I wanted to get better at speaking in front of camera and not just being behind the camera, I started the York Creators podcast. So this was weekly interviews with the creative community. I built a set where the cameras never moved. I put out a few Facebook posts asking for guests, asked them to fill in an application form, which would give me prompts for things to ask them about, and let them automatically book in a time slot that worked for my diary. After each podcast, I gave each person, I asked them to recommend me another person to interview, which gave me a constant stream of guests. I did this for 40 weeks in a row without taking a break. So again, more time making, less time on admin. And the idea of all of these simple, repeatable projects is you put yourself on a deadline that you commit to publicly. Doing that means that you have to ship work, you have to get it out the door, otherwise you start to ruin your reputation as someone that sticks to their word. And what you want here ultimately is consistency, because consistency helps people to understand who you are and what you're doing in the world. It makes it easier for you to approach people and ask them for things because they can see that you're already committed to doing this thing and it's not just some pie in the sky idea that might never happen. We are all drawn to people who are already taking action. And this is really important because when you haven't got a budget, your greatest assets are in fact the people around you. Telling a great story can change the trajectory of your life if you get it in front of the right people. So I'm going to finish with 5 tips for unlocking help from people around you when you haven't got any money. So tip number 1, find a network of people with similar interests. So in York, for example, we've got a York Filmmakers Network, we've got a York Creatives Network, we've got a photography network, a tech network, a Guild of Media Arts, and plenty more. And most cities will have some version of these networks. They will have people with shared interests, and each network will have a leader or a group of leaders. So these people are actually really important because they already know a lot of people and they already have a vested interest in maintaining their reputation as a connector and a helpful leader. So reaching out to them, telling them who you are and why your story is interesting, why it relates to their network, and how you can perhaps create some value for the network in return for what it is that you want, that's going to make a good deal with those people. If you are, particularly if you're offering some of your own time or expertise in return for whatever it is that you're asking for. If you can get that network leader to support you, they can then help you reach a ton more people than you can on your own. They can part of the network for the thing that you want, help you get some resources, help you get people. Secondly, so if for some reason you can't find this network, start your own. So I started my first network simply as a Facebook group, just by inviting a handful of people, telling them to invite their friends. Running these networks have given me so many opportunities. So not only do I regularly get recommended for jobs, but also I get asked to speak at things like this, which is great. So this one's quite important, be honest in your storytelling. So make sure that you're telling stories about where you're at. So a mistake that people sometimes make is they look at YouTubers or famous people who are super successful and they think, well, I want to be like them. I want to be successful. And so they pretend to be something that they're not. They try and tell made up stories to try and make themselves sound better than they are. And that's really the wrong approach. So in 2015, I made a video about not having space was really difficult. That was what basically led to a few months later somebody getting in touch and saying, "Oh, have you heard about this charity?" And that's how I ended up getting the keys to that to that property. Stuff happens when you're clear about what it is that you want and why it's important. So tell stories about not having the resources, and then you will get there much quicker. When somebody does help you out, be grateful. So this is a story in itself. So of course, thank them privately first, but then thank them in public. So let everybody know what good thing somebody has done to help you, because not only does this bring some publicity to the people that have been generous to you, it also shows that people are believing in you enough to support you on your journey, which gives you credibility. We all like to support people that other people are also supporting because there's safety in numbers. So finally, practice your story until you can say it without thinking about it. So, the first thing people ask you when you go to a networking event is always, what do you do? And if you stumble over this answer and you say, well, I kind of do this thing and I've not quite figured it out yet, then it's not really going to make a great impression. If it sounds cheesy, but look in the mirror and say it until you can say your story without thinking. If you can confidently look at them and say, I'm reinventing the concept of a social club for a 21st century audience, they're going to be like, oh, wow, okay, I've not heard that before. Tell me more about that. So there's a secret that I learned from a book called Key Person of Influence, which is the barometer of whether your story is interesting is what comes out of the other person's mouth when you introduce yourself. So if you say, oh, I do this, and they go, oh, yeah, and how long have you been doing that? Then unfortunately, you know that what you said is actually not really that interesting because nobody really cares about how long you've been doing the thing for. They're just stalling for time because they can't think of anything else. If you'd have told them something interesting, then they would have asked something about that. Okay, so just to recap, remember, define your audience, set deadlines. So take this seriously. You might not have a client breathing down your neck saying, this story needs to be told by this time. But if somebody was paying you, if they said, you know, deliver me this asset by next week, or you're not getting paid, you would do it, and you need to be that strict with yourself. But at the same time, remember, consistency beats intensity. So if you want to do a load of work, don't plan it all for one day and then get really annoyed at yourself that you've not done it. Plan it out carefully and make sure you can keep doing it. The best way to do that is a simple, repeatable project. Then how to bring opportunities to you: find a network, start your own, be honest about what you have got and what you haven't got, be grateful, and you'll become credible, and then practice. Thank you.
Fantastic advice. Well done. That was really good. And thank you very much, both of you, for some really interesting, practical presentations. I mean, everyone can take something from those presentations. I've been writing myself a little mental list as well, so appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to the audience and see what we've got. Oh, Olivia says Tangerine's her favourite movie, by the way, Wayne. So Robbie's got a question for you, Wayne. Should you have several authors or just one?
I'm not sure what that means. Several authors is in.
I'm trying to think. Probably because was this about when you were talking about? Is he talking about whether you're writing the story yourself, or whether you're bringing other people in to write the story for you?
Sure. So yeah. So I mean, a key part of my creative practice is collaboration. So you know, like I said, nobody's an island, and people generally want to share and collaborate and share stories. I mean, there are a couple of pitfalls, like you know, finding the right creative collaborators is always tricky, and it's always a challenge. And sometimes you have to know when to kind of say this is not working, or you know, I want to explore this further. Mm-hmm. So there's that, and then I guess it also dictates the genre in which you're working. So if you're working in documentary, it gets a little bit kind of morally kind of muddier, I think, when you're making work, because you know, we can never ever truly be objective. So we're telling the story that we think is the story we want to tell, and you know, if we're doing a fly on the wall documentary, you know, we're making creative choices around what piece of footage goes next to the next piece of footage, which then rewrites the story. So I think it goes back to intention. Mm-hmm. So you know, what's the intention of telling the story? I always give myself, when I make documentary, I always ask myself, well, what's the intention of the story? What am I wanting to get out of it? So, you know, I'm very aware that a lot of the topics I make are quite sensitive, and I don't want to fall into sensationalism and sensationalist documentaries. So I think holding yourself to account is really important, and that's what is great about collaborating. You know, there's another voice that can hold you to account if you get, like I often do, very carried away.
No, surely not. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Ben, how much power should an audience have over an author and their work? Yes, it depends on the kind of project, does it?
Yeah, I guess. Well, so I guess taking that question at face value, how much power should an audience have over an author and their work? I wouldn't say they should have any power, really. It's up to the author what story they want to tell. What an author needs to do, though, is they need to know why they're telling that story, and they also need some limitations. You know, all creativity thrives on limitation, and if you don't know who your audience is, then you're just going to end up creating a mush of nothingness. So, yes, knowing your audience is really important, but then you know, you don't have to listen to their every whim and let them tell you what story you should write, because it's your story at the end of the day.
And you know, you both talked about, you know, you've got smartphone, you've got free apps. You talked about Tangerine, you know, and the fact that on an iPhone 5, which like are old as the hills, that you could actually produce something that wins a film festival. But for most general people that aren't like amazingly sort of talented and creative, or well, maybe they are amazingly talented and creative, but they haven't worked that out yet. But you know, someone who's just come out of school, or someone like me who's not done any filmmaking really, apart from a little bit of dabbling, how far can I actually progress with a smartphone and free apps, do you think?
I think you absolutely can make stunning, beautiful films off a smartphone and free apps. So so I have a really quick story about smartphones. So I was just after that blip we had in 2020, and I got a job that summer to do some outdoor filming, and I was there, and I had my brand new shiny camera, and I was there, and it was a really hot summer, and my camera overheated on set, and it just turned itself off, and I had one afternoon to get this footage. That's all I had, so I shot it on my iPhone. I finished shooting it on my iPhone, and when I went back and I edited it and I cut it into film, and I'm not going to mention the client because I never told them this happened, and I delivered the film and nobody questioned it. Nobody went, that footage looks different. And actually what it did do, if I'm honest, is it freed me up creatively a lot. So we're all used to seeing this, right? We're all used to seeing this in public. So what it enabled me to do is it enabled me to build a relationship, a closer relationship with the subject that I was working with, and getting the camera into different perspectives and different angles that I wouldn't have been able to do with the camera this big. So I was able to explore different camera techniques, different camera angles in the moment. I was able to build a stronger relationship with the subject that I was working with, because they were instantly comfortable with the phone, because we do it all the time. And what it did do is it opened me up to a whole new avenue of filmmaking, which is smartphone filmmaking. And I teach a lot of smartphone filmmaking now, and I regularly practice smartphone filmmaking as a professional. So I think what will stop you is not the technology. You know, I look at all films, we shot them off 16mm. Like, if like technologically they're terrible, but you know, they give a different visceral quality to it. So I think what stops us is ourselves. We get in our own way, I think, sometimes. And then I don't know if you get this, Ben, or if any of you guys on this seminar get it, but there's a real thing called filmmakers envy, which is when you're collaborating or you're working on set and you're working with another filmmaker and they've got a better camera than you, that you then save all your money and you go out and buy that camera, right? Because, you know, the better the camera you are, the better filmmaker you are. Absolutely not true at all. The better camera you've got, the more money you spend. That's what it means. And the more work you've added to your workflow. That's also what it means.
And the more hard drives you have to buy.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. And storage space on the cloud.
Yeah.
So Wayne, just while you're on the subject of your smartphone courses, do you want to plug where you can go and get access to them?
Yeah, so mine are all, if you're on Skillshare, they're on Skillshare. So they're part of your package. If you're on Udemy, they're on Udemy. Or if you're not on those platforms, they're on Vimeo on demand. Okay,
great. Just for folk to be able to go find them, because it sounds really useful. Okay, just a little note from Olivia. She's saying Tangerine used an iPhone 5, but used the Moondog Labs anamorphic lens and used an iOS software called Filmic Pro. Still falls in the low budget for a project, though, when you think about how much equipment can go into. So just a little.
Yeah, so anamorphic lens, you know, they're a couple $100, and Filmic Pro, I think, is $12. Because there's also the other thing as well with smartphone filmmaking is there's a whole industry around it. So there's a company called Moment based out in Seattle, and they do phone cases for every phone and their own lenses that have built-in mounts. So you can put anamorphic lens on, you can put fisheye and 50mm lenses. So you can actually get cinematic looks all from your smartphone.
Just a quick one, Ben. I've just noticed something. Your agenda finishes at 7. But we usually go on to past. Are you okay for time to continue doing a bit of Q&A? Is that okay? All right, Brill. Just sort of really double check that. That's great. And are you all right, Ben? Sorry, not Ben. I've just asked you, Wayne. That's great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great stuff.
I'm here for the duration.
Great stuff. So a question for you then, Wayne. How long should you spend on planning and pre-production?
I think it depends on the project and the scope of the project. Yeah, I mean, you get quicker and you get better, and the other key to planning is processes. So, you know, the more you do it, you put processes in place. So you have a set of templates that you can use. So you have you'll find a way that you work in terms of writing. So I have a very strict writing schedule when I'm writing things. usually, really, really frustratingly, it's at night.
Mhm.
So it means that I have a period of my creative career where I'm not sleeping a great deal, because that just works for me. So you'll find processes in place, and it depends on the scope of your project. I wrote and directed a 360 interactive film last year with a very decent budget in 3 weeks. I wouldn't normally do that, but our funder came to us and said, if we don't spend it, we lose it, and we have to deliver this. And the other company have dropped out. Can you do it? So, you know, sometimes you can do it super fast if you have the motivation and the space. Other times, I personally like to have a pre-production period and then a break, let everything set, and then come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes.
Cool. What about you, Ben? How much planning?
Sorry, can you remind me the question?
How long should you spend on planning and pre-production?
Well, it really depends on the project, but again, yeah, you can do it quickly if you want, and sometimes you get some really nice unexpected results when you do that. I mean, there's been times where I've worked on something and I've gone, okay, this is literally like the first draft of it, and I give myself a very short deadline just to see what comes out, because sometimes if you give yourself a long deadline, you end up wasting half the time procrastinating anyway. And I've done, right, there's the first draft, and I'll come back to it a few days later knowing that I've got the time to expand it, and then looked at it and thought, actually, I've got it there already. But you don't want to get into the habit of kind of forcing yourself to always do it that way.
Yeah.
So it really depends. And yeah,
I think sometimes it's budget driven as well. If a budget is attached to it, I think it is budget driven. I mean, I know filmmakers that try and do the 33% rule and have a third on each part of the process. So pre-production, production, and post-production. I don't have that rule. I always find that I kind of have 20% pre-production, and the rest is split between production. And then I realize I've got rubbish maths, and I'm actually at 120%, not 100% worth of my time.
That's all right, I'm rubbish at maths too, mate, don't worry. Okay, question from Olivia. Can you have multiple audiences for a single project, or multiple audiences for multiple projects? And should you commit to one audience? So this one sounds like it's for you, Ben, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So one at a time. Okay, multiple audience for a single project. Yes, but you're obviously adding more complexity. The thing that sometimes people misunderstand about defining your audience is they think, oh, if it's too narrow, then nobody's going to be interested. And sorry, I'm just going to have a sip of water. Yeah, and so defining your audience doesn't mean these are the only people who are going to be interested in the story that you're telling. It just means these are who it's going to really resonate with, and then there will of course be plenty of people around that. So just as an example, for about 5-6 years maybe, the only clothes that I bought had pictures of people with motorbikes and tattoos on them. There was something about that aesthetic and that kind of period of Instagram that, like, you know, that was all that I got sent on the marketing adverts, and it was all images of people, you know, going across the desert in America with these riding these motorbikes, having tattoos and things like that. And something about that aesthetic, I just thought, yeah, that's me, I'll buy that. I didn't have a motorbike, I don't have any tattoos, but by them clearly defining what they wanted to tell, the story they were telling with their clothes, that resonated with me and a whole bunch of other people who made that company very profitable. And so they're not saying we will only sell to people with motorbikes and tattoos, but by being specific about their audience, they create an interesting story, which was then applicable to a whole lot of people around this small issue. So I think that's probably the best way I can describe it. But then, of course, yes, you can have multiple audiences for multiple projects. You know, that's what we do as commercial filmmakers. You know, you might be working for one company one day, one for the next. Sometimes if you're a really busy day, you might be working for 3 clients in one day, and you have to switch your brain between them. So yes, you can of course have multiple different ones.
And I think that's why your idea of defining your audience at the beginning is so important, because if you are switching between them all the time, then you need to have a really clear understanding in your head as to who you're actually aiming at, I suppose. Do you want to add anything to that, Wayne? Are you?
Yeah, I think I think again, it depends on the parameters of the project. So if I'm working for a client and the film is, you know, a marketing tool, like, you know, the parameters are already predefined in terms of the audience and what they're trying to achieve, and then that then impacts the storytelling. If I'm I think I approach my storytelling slightly differently, is because I don't necessarily define my audience. I define what connection I want to make with them through my work. So what's the impact I want to have? What is the emotionality, and how do I want to then to engage with it? Which then lends itself to multiple platforms, whether it is immersive film, or whether it kind of lends itself to more traditional linear storytelling. Yeah, that's the way I approach it.
Good, and that leans lovely onto the next question, which is around how would filming a non-linear story impact the filming process? And it's aimed at Ben, but I think it's for either of you or both. Okay.
I'll let Ben
first,
start. You start,
okay.
and I'll piggyback it.
Sure. Well, the thing about obviously non-linear filmmaking is you still need to plan it out before you start. Otherwise, you can't just start shooting loads of random stuff and say, oh, it's non-linear, because you probably just end up with a very random art film, which might be able to edit to something good. But yeah, you still need to plan it out, and you still need to know where you're going. And so actually it doesn't change it that much, because you might write it all and then chop it up and move it around. But still the planning and the pre-production process is just as important. You can't just throw that out the window.
There's a really good example of that, and it's a film called Exit Through the Gift Shop. And it's the one that's based around Banksy, and to the point, and I won't ruin it for those that haven't seen it, but basically it's a documentary about Banksy that goes a very different way to anticipated. And the last bit of the film is about fixing the challenges of not planning it out. Okay. But yeah, like Ben said, like you can, if you have an idea in the pre-production stages, because that actually has real world impacts on the way you shoot things and the way you budget your time and your resources. If you're going to make something that's circular in narrative, having made that decision prior to filming will make your filming much easier. Doesn't mean you have to stick to it, but it gives you a framework and a foundation to work from.
Right, thank you. Okay, Shlomi's got one for you, Ben. She says, congratulations for your personal introduction story. The use of visuals and personal anecdotes nicely brought to life your story. What typically inspires you to start a project, a particular story or an intriguing visual?
Oh, that's a good question. It can be there, but I guess usually it's whatever story it triggers in my head. So I like everybody, you consume tons of material across lots of different mediums all the time. And, as I said before, it can sometimes be too overwhelming. You get bombarded by stuff here, there, and everywhere. And I guess what I'm always looking for is, where am I seeing connections where I haven't seen other people made connections, if that makes sense. So I might have been reading like a very, like a book from the 1800s one day, and then seeing like a marketing advert the next day and thinking, oh, they're actually talking about the same thing, even though they're disconnected. I've never seen anybody relate these two things before. And so I'll think, how can I approach that challenge? So that's sort of the way that I do it. I keep tons of notes in my phone. So yeah, I mentioned jokingly, like, those 400 notes in your phone don't mean anything to your audience. I think I've got 4,000 in mind that I've not done anything with yet, but they all become source material for the next thing that I do. And I kind of think it as like, they're sat in there brewing like a good cup of tea, and then eventually they'll kind of come out and it'll be lovely and well formed.
So with that then, is it, because you talked in your presentation about reverse engineering the story to fit the audience, but then if you're talking about what's inspiring in disparate things that haven't been connected together, is it actually kind of a hybrid of both happening at the same time, where you've got all of these different notes and thoughts, and then you've also got a defined audience, and you're kind of almost like matchmaking between the two? Is that how it works for you?
Sort of, although I see them as different stages of the process. So the inspiration is obviously it's like the spark at the beginning, but then you then have to put that through the process of thinking, what is this going to mean to the audience? So it's two stages.
Cool. And do you think having less money and fewer tools, in a sense, actually enhances the creativity? Or is that one of these sort of old adages that just sort of makes you feel better when you're skint?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If I said before, creativity thrives on limitation, and so the more limitation you've got, you're forced to be more creative. We've all heard stories of people who've suddenly been given loads of budget and they don't really know what to do with it. That's not a problem that I would complain about, but yeah. So I think it's hard to say. It also depends on your personality as well, doesn't it? Like, some people do really well with the whole scaling to bigger projects, and you get some really lovely famous people who do really well, and then you get some who kind of go the other way. So it's really hard to say definitively, but I think you should take it as, don't be weighed down by the fact that you don't have budget. Don't be constantly thinking, oh, when I get this, then I'll be the next level. When I get that, then it will unlock this. Like, don't self-impose barriers. I think smallness and low budget can be a benefit.
So I was going to say, thinking like, if you feel like you've got more agency to play and to be creative and to hack things together and to try stuff, then it kind of frees you up a bit. Whereas if you've suddenly been hit with, like, if you've been landed a big budget to make something, or even a reasonable budget to make something, you kind of almost feel obligated to use the red camera, or to, employ people that are professionals rather than your Auntie Nora, and so in a sense, does that kind of almost force you to sort of fit the constraints rather than be that playful?
Yeah. I mean, big budgets create big expectations, don't they? So, and if you don't take the money, they can't tell you what to do.
That's really true as well. Unless they're the audience, and then they can't. Well, maybe not. They can just be themselves, I suppose. Okay, a question for you, Wayne. How do you stay motivated in your work?
I mean, it's a constant challenge for any creative. I'm really good at compartmentalizing things. So I go out in, it sounds really cheesy, and I do apologize, but I spend a lot of time outside. I take the dog for a walk, I go in nature. I get on my bike and I cycle with a podcast on, and I try and disconnect from the problem at hand, and then I let my subconscious brain do what that needs to do, and then come back to it. Or I'll try and do something really physical, or I'll speaking of like my story of never being a car mechanic. I actually never did it as a career, but I did learn how to fix cars, and I have a real passion for cars. So I have an old one that I've been restoring for about 15 years. So I'll jump in to the garage and tinker with that a little bit and do something completely different for me, and then come back to it fresh.
What about you, Ben? How do you stay motivated?
I think I'm very lucky in the fact that I've got this incredible community around me, and so there are obviously days where I'm kind of feeling down about something I'm working on, it's not really getting there, and then I'll have some meeting booked in with someone who's asking me about something they're struggling with, and then just me thinking about trying to solve their problem rather than my own, helping somebody with their project gives me a little burst of energy, and then it's almost like it unlocks a different way of thinking, and then I'll go back to my own project and think, oh yeah, if I was advising myself on this, I would just say this, so maybe I'll try that. And then of course, when there's no one around, podcasts are great. There's tons of podcasts on absolutely everything, and just hearing intelligent people talk about the way they've solved their problems, is that I find that quite motivating. And if all else fails, then just watch TV and go for a run.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to spring one on you now, Maggie, because you write books. What about you? What helps you stay motivated?
Panic.
Well, panic at asking the question, or panic about staying motivated?
No, staying motivated. No, I mean, for me, I think it's just this like incredible desire to tell the story, to get it out. You know what I mean? It's almost like, it's like the alien inside of you, right? You have to get it out before it kind of bursts through your chest. And that's really what it feels like for me. But yeah, I hate the times, I despise them, when you're kind of stuck in that moment and you just don't know how to go forward. And I think one of the best things I ever heard was to write through it. And even if everything you're writing is terrible and you get rid of it, if you just keep kind of going through it, you'll get there. It's just, or else you can panic and play video games. Yeah.
It also works.
Yeah. I recommend video games.
That's cool. This is equivalent to going for a walk. You just do it in a computer, Cool. Thank you for that, Maggie. Okay, Ben, how does music enhance a story?
Oh, massively. So yeah, it's really interesting. So obviously I got into kind of filmmaking from having like a musical background, and I think the way that I kind of picked it up quickly, I guess, in comparison to some of my friends who weren't musicians and then tried to pick up like filmmaking and that type of stuff. You know, having a knowledge of rhythm and melody and pacing and things like influences that massively. And so, you know, as Wayne said before, our brains are really attuned to audio, in the fact that, you know, you can listen to songs and you can have these incredible emotional feelings without any visuals at all. And so 90% of the time, if I'm trying to tell a story, I will be thinking, okay, what is the sound bed for this? What is the emotion? And music is an incredible way of communicating that. And so literally, you know, most of my projects where there's not like a solid brief, I will either write myself one, or I will be thinking about what I'm trying to get to with this, and then flicking through soundtracks, whether that's from like a free library or a paid library or something I've written, and you keep going through it until you find like, oh, this feels like the thing that I'm trying to say, and then you can drop that in your editor, and you can literally just like write in notes that drop in, okay, at this point in time there has to be something uplifting, at this point in time there has to be something challenging, at this point there has to be some kind of payoff, and then you've got your shot list there because you've already, the music has told you what to write.
What about you, Wayne? What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I hear my score before it's even created or before it's even kind of bedded down on the timeline. And music goes across everything that I make in digital technology. So it's for me, it's super integral to the storytelling. And whether it's about pacing or whether it's creating really like enhancing the visceral reaction you want your audience to have within that scene, or you know, whether it's actually you make a conscious decision to go against the emotion of the scene with something that's jarring that then creates experiences for audiences.
Great, thank you. What about the limitations of using natural light? Are there any limitations of using natural light? Are there things you have to be aware of? Both smiling.
Yeah, so Robbie, I'm really, really glad you've asked that question, and I've got a very, very practical example. So let me show you the limitations of natural light. There you go. That's the limitations of natural light. It fades. So when I started this Zoom, I had this beautiful sunshine coming from my window, and then as the sun set, it gets very dark very quick. So you're somewhat time limited when you're using natural light, unless your story lends itself to the duration of time and light. The major challenge with natural light is consistency of shot. So you generally only get, so a really good example is golden hour. So you know, golden hour is not an hour either. It's about half an hour realistically, because and it's the hour just before the sun sets, and it's the most beautiful, gorgeous golden light ever. But it is about 30 minutes long. So there's I'm doing a course on virtual production. I start in a couple of weeks. I know some people that are on this course, on these Zooms, are doing them as well, and they gave a really great example of it. That in terms of how virtual production can fix this. So you know, if you're shooting a scene at sunset and it goes wrong, you have to wait till the next day, and it might not be the right sunset, so you have to wait till the next day. So that 1 week shoot that you've planned out could actually, in reality, be 5 weeks. So the limitations are that unless you are super lucky and you get it first time, you're probably not going to get it that day. And it might, and then obviously, you know, we're making films in the UK where we know weather can have 5 different seasons in a day. And today's a great example of that, really. So it's fantastic when it's working for you. When it's not, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. So if you're going to use natural light outside, write it into your script, or write it into your story that, you know, it happens over it happens over the course of a day.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, there's just 2 parts to it, really. Like, I remember when I first got started, I mean, the cameras I was using, even if it was light, the cameras would be dark because the sensitivity was terrible. And so there's definitely been some improvements in technology. I mean, you know, like the Sony A7S series and other similar kind of mirrorless cameras now, you can shoot at night without external lights, which is amazing. And it's opened up the doors for like documentary filmmaking in the evening and things. So that's definitely an improvement. But you're still not going to make it look like it was well lit just because you got a good camera. It's not going to work. So yeah, as Wayne said before, lighting is really important. And that's, I've heard people kind of it's a bit pretentious, but say like photography and filmmaking is painting with light. And so if you almost think about it in terms of like the camera is just the canvas, really, the light is like the thing that goes on it. So yeah.
Lights up the color, otherwise everything would be grey.
Yep.
And Maz has got a good suggestion. She's suggesting that you could film on June the 14th, I think it's the 21st actually, the longest day of the year, and just make sure all your schedules are for that month or that week.
The problem is if everybody shoots on that day, everybody's booked.
Exactly. Maybe you can do it over the month.
yeah, we'll rotate. The other thing, when shooting at night, like irrespective of how good your camera is, and I would argue, so the cows go home really, regardless of your camera, you will get grain. You'll get grain if you shoot at night, because as Ben said, it's a sensor that is letting light in, and so when you don't have it, there's less of it to be let in. So anything from a torch to a bounce board can significantly enhance the look and the visual style that you're going for.
Okay, we've got a curveball just come in from Adeline. Hi there. If you're working on animation or VFX within your film with a low budget, are there any tips you can recommend to reduce the costs? Thank you.
One tip is you can learn how to do it yourself. I'm currently, if you work in the creative industry, you're constantly learning all the time. I've just at the moment made I don't know if it's an error or an inspired choice, but I'm trying to learn Procreate and how I can build that into my filmmaking process. So you could do that, or again, like things like Unreal Engine. Like there's a myriad of, if you have the time and the will, there's a myriad of tutorials out there that'll teach you how to, and that's free. It's I think, and I'm sure somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's free until you earn your first million.
Something like that, yeah. It's quite high.
And then you pay a percentage
before you got to pay for it. And I think Unity as well. You can get Unity free up to a point, especially if you're a student or anything like that. But I think you can get it free up to a point. Blender's free as well to download. If you need to work with animation through Blender, that might be one to try.
It's a massive learning curve. But again, if you have the inclination to do it, like the resources are there for free.
And to be fair, once you've looked at one, I'm no expert by any stretch. I'm a total beginner, and I've literally done a few YouTube videos and dabbled a little bit. But they all seem to have a similar concept in terms of scenes, and they've got similar language across the three.
Yeah, from what I've found, there's two main systems: there's layer-based and node-based. And when you understand the difference between layers and nodes. So they all work off one or the other principle, majoritively. So then you can jump between them, unless you use DaVinci, and then it works off both.
Okay, handy to know. The other option is Fiverr. Go on Fiverr and get someone else to do it for you for a budget under a lower budget. Okay, no problem, Adeline. Okay, I'm just conscious of time. We've run out of time. We've only got a minute left. And Olivia says, sorry for being a tech nerd. And Olivia's also said to Adeline, she'll do it for you. So you guys need to be in touch with each other. See if you can add each other on LinkedIn, and that would be a good way. And it's Olive on LinkedIn, so not Olivia. So maybe do that. Okay, thank you for that, guys. That was really interesting and useful, really down to earth and practical, and just I think what was needed as well as part of the festival. So we've had quite a lot of conversations about high level philosophical and psychological things, of course, which is part of this as well in terms of the psychology of your audience and how you can make a really good film. But it's also really great just to have the kind of like what are the practical steps to doing this. Now I've inspired everyone for 2 weeks. They can go off and download all their apps and get their phone out and go and make stuff, which is great. So I really appreciate the time you've taken today, and your presentations have been fantastic. So thank you very much for that. So our next session tomorrow is on the future of digital storytelling. So again, we've got a bit of a random mix. We've got Robert Morgan, who is been involved. Oh, he's from Playlines, and he was involved with the Megaverse project Surge, but he's also been involved in some other really interesting immersive theatre projects. We've got Chris Phillip, who is BFI International Development Officer, but also works and has set up Game Anglia. So again, he's produced quite a lot of resources for young people to learn and get into gaming. And then Sharon Matthew, who is AI Tech UK. So again, looking at artificial intelligence and the future of AI and ethics in the future of digital storytelling. So we'll be met by those three guys tomorrow at 12. So come along if you want to. If not, if you can't make it, we'll be recording the sessions again, as we always do. So check out our website, northerndigifest.co.uk. All the recordings are there, and all of the remaining tickets are there if you want to book a ticket. Thank you again to Sign for sponsoring the event. Thanks to all our audience and participants for their amazing questions again, and being so kind to us all. I really do appreciate that. And thanks very much. I'm going to go away now and get myself a glass of wine. Thanks very much, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.